I'm trying to do something. Okay. I guess I can't get the question. Sorry, it took me a while to do that. But today I'll be reading The Power of Her Pen. And you can see over there the book that Z read yesterday. If you missed it, you can look at that and say, oh, I want to go back and watch that video. It's pretty nice. The Power of Her Pen. Okay. Ethel Lois Payne always had an ear for stories. Her grandpa's parents' front porch stories of Kentucky cotton fields and Tennessee auction blocks, her parents' kitchen table stories, and northbound trains from sharecroppers' plots. Long past her bedtime, Ethel collected the stories of people who followed the path with dreams. In 1911, the year Ethel was born, her father William worked as a pulling porter on a railroad train, helping passengers with their luggage and serving them in dining cars on trains that crisscrossed the country. He tossed bundles of newspapers called the Chicago Defender onto train platforms, spreading news of jobs and hope for blacks in the segregated South. Ethel didn't see her daddy much, but his firm hand ruled was from a distance. He and her mama, Bessie, a Latin teacher, filled their home with an equal measure of discipline of love. On Saturdays, once the house was spotless, Bessie took Ethel and her 5 siblings to the white side of town, where there were libraries with shelves stacked tall with books. There, Ethel flipped through pages and memorized pages to recite to anyone who will listen. One month after Ethel started high school, her father came home after a long run on the railroads and took to bed, sick with headache. The house was hushed. The doctor was called, but nothing could be done. After William passed, Bessie worked hard to make ends meet. Ethel walked a mile to school each day. The neighborhood residents screamed and yelled and threw rocks at a black girl who dared to go to school with whites. Sometimes I stood my ground. Sometimes I got a bloody nose from fighting. But that was the way it was, Ethel later recalled. Ethel spent her school days daydreaming of life far beyond her neighborhood, except when she was in English class. There, her teacher, Miss Dixon, encouraged her writing. Her mother encouraged her at home. Ethel wrote during the day, and she read her stories aloud to her family at night. The school wouldn't let a black student work on the school newspaper, but after reading Ethel's writing, it did publish her very first story. During the Great Depression, with money even tighter than before, Ethel attended a local college with free tuition and took writing classes. When World War II began, the United States fought overseas, while Ethel fought against racism and injustice in her own backyard. She started by organizing a women's social group at her church to make improvements in her community. Then she started a story hour for children. Next, she started a scholarship fund. After battling long and hard in Chicago, Ethel set her sights on politics in Washington, D.C., and began writing letters to newspapers and commenting on unjust laws and discrimination against blacks. I was beginning to have the seeds of rebellion churning up in me, Ethel later said. By the time World War II ended in 1945, Ethel was aching to see a world far beyond the south side of Chicago. She got the chance when she answered a newspaper ad for a job overseas with her mother blessing. She was on her way to Tokyo, Japan. Ethel set off to explore filling page after diary page with her observance and experience. Some pages she devoted to the stories of black soldiers. Life as a club social director on a U.S. military base kept her busy organizing activities for these soldiers, but she noticed that even in Japan, black American soldiers who had fought alongside white American soldiers had separate housing, the hardest jobs on the base, and almost no chance to be promoted. Ethel never imagined her voice would soon be heard in the United States all the way from Japan. Ethel showed her diary entries to a friend, a reporter who was on assignment in Japan. With Ethel's permission, he shared her writing with his editor back in Chicago. Her sister was the first to call with the news. One of Ethel's articles about black soldiers stationed in Japan had made its way across the seas and into newspaper headlines, which were now in hands of thousands. When her job in Japan ended in 1951, Ethel returned to her home, her family, and a job offer from the Chicago Defender, one of only 2 daily black newspapers in the country, and the main source of news in black community. It celebrated the births, graduation, marriages, and retirement news of its black citizens. Ethel once joked you couldn't grow up in Chicago and be black if you didn't know the Chicago Defender. Good thing it was a joke, because if I grew up in Chicago, I would be really sad because I don't know who they are. As the features Reporter Ethel wrote about housing jobs, healthcare, and community events. After 1 year, Ethel and her notebook headed to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, where politics debated civil rights. As more and more readers opened their newspapers to read the articles written by Ethel L. Payne, the Defender's circulation grew. After 3 years, her editor asked, "Why don't you go down to Washington?" Oh, that's right. Of the 204 reporters, Ethel was the only 3 black journalists issued a White House press pass. It allowed her to sit in the treaty room of the White House, where the president met with journalists. Only when the president nodded could a reporter ask a question. These experienced reporters knew how to jump to their feet, hoping their voices would be the one to reach the president's ear. At first, Ethel sat waiting, then she stood, then she waited more. Finally, President Digwick D. turned to Ethel and nodded. "Mr. President," Ethel began shakily. "Mr. President," she looked down at her carefully written question and asked the president's view on a racial incident that had occurred at the White House. One second, guys. Z. What's this?
U.S. Negro reporter.
Okay, that's what she said.
It's not about where you say it.
I'm not saying that.
It's just the color black
See?
in Spanish.
Cool. I knew that. I knew that the whole time. Draws Ike's wrath. A headline screamed, but Ethel kept asking questions. The white press was so busy asking questions on other issues that the blacks and their problems were completely ignored. She later recalled she asked how the president planned to enforce the Supreme Court ruling in the Brown versus the Board of Education case, which outlawed segregation. "I wish that all the people could understand that we want for our children the same rights as any other human," begins, she later explained. When left of the office in 1961, Ethel asked the young president, John F. Kennedy, about his civil rights voting record. When Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, she asked Lyndon B. Johnson about the Vietnam War and Civil Rights Act, and then she asked Richard M. Nixon questions about the lack of blacks in this administration, and Jimmy Carter questions on education. Ethel spent so much time in the White House, she earned the title First Lady of Black Press. Outside the White House, Ethel interviewed protesters in Montgomery, Alabama, and Little Rock, Arkansas, and marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. Somebody had to do the fighting. Somebody had to speak up. Ethel later declared writing stories of the protesters' struggles was her way of doing that. For nearly 5 decades, Ethel fought long and hard to bring attention to the issues that mattered most in her community and became the voice of those who had none. Ethel wrote stories that the mainstream media refused to. It was her questions to presidents that finally made readers of all races pay attention to the plight of African Americans. Her reporting highlighted the struggle for justice, equal pay, housing, and education, and in her role of informing her readers, Ethel created awareness and activism in the fight for civil rights. And this is the people she wrote about: Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Dorothy Height, and Nelson Mandela. It's in cursive, so I can't really read it. Over here is Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Dorothy Height, and Nelson Mandela. Always with an ear for stories, Ethel asked the questions and demanded the answers for people whose paths were paved with dreams. I've had a box seat on history, Ethel once said, and that's a rare thing. So this is Ethel, and she passed away on May 28th, 1999. That's sad. If she were still alive, I would really want to meet her because I love what she's done. And then she's heard of like Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, I think. Now that's a crazy story. That's people I've always wanted to meet. Like the people in our past that help us get to the future, because without them, the future wouldn't be good. Like, thanks for enjoying this story, but the future wouldn't be good. Without them, the future would be, the world would probably be like cut into 2 halves, black and white. But with them, it joined us all together. Without them, I do not know what we would do. We would be crazy people, and we would run on the streets and burn people's houses down just to get back at them for calling you a mean name. That's how crazy we would be. But you know, that's how God made us. That's what we gotta do. And I really like that. Okay, bye. Thanks for the talk with